For me, and as I think for many of you, My Hero Academia has become a huge part of my life. While I think the story is far from perfect, on a personal level, it's one of my favorite fictional stories ever. So, before the final season begins airing, I wanted to make this little list of the moments I'm most excited to see animated. If it wasn't already clear enough, this video will include major manga spoilers, so please click off right now if you haven't read the manga yourself. Another thing I need to mention before we begin is that I've only included actual long scenes when making this list. Some of my favorite moments were just a single panel or a few panels, but if I tried to include everything, this video would never end. So, to make things simple, I'm limiting myself to talking only about the big things. Also, keep in mind that my ranking is a little loose because I really struggle to put some moments over the others when they are all good in their own way. With all of that said, let's begin. At number 10, I had the part 2 of the conversation that Deku and Uraraka had on a cliff overlooking the city. Once the battle was over, we kept seeing Uraraka trying to pretend that everything is fine, trying to put a smile on her face, and here she finally breaks down. This scene is simply beautiful, both visually but also in terms of the story. Deku finds Uraraka, tells her how she always puts everyone above herself, and calls her his hero, which, in MHA's universe, is more impactful than any declaration of love could ever be. At number 9, I put the time skip. Chapters 430, 431, and, if we're lucky and we actually get that animated, chapter 431.5 tied up the story perfectly. Chapter 430 was a perfect ending in terms of the themes. We had so many callbacks to the very beginning of the story, like the lines, "Not all men are born equal, you can be a hero," and All Might giving Deku the suit and telling him the exact same thing he told him when he gave him One for All, that he too has earned that power fair and square. Chapter 431 was more about the personal ending, how seeking happiness is just as important as saving the world. Plus, I simply can't wait to see the anime show all the characters we love as adults. Number 8 is the reveal in chapter 419. We find out that All for One has orchestrated everything. He stole Tenko's original quirk and gave him decay instead, and, before that, he even influenced his birth. It's such a good reveal because it makes perfect sense. Tenko's backstory always seemed a bit too perfect to just be a simple series of unlucky coincidences. I'll admit, for the longest time I hated All for One's presence in the story, but the final war arc made me change my mind. As a villain, he is simply entertaining and interesting to follow. And, as we find out in this chapter, the story wouldn't exist without him, not in the way it is. At number 7, I put the hospital conversation between Deku, Bakugo, and All Might. It's just a beautiful, bittersweet moment. Deku opens up about Tenko. We get the actual final words Shigaraki said to Deku. We see Bakugo's moment of vulnerability, and, finally, we get All Might thanking both Deku and Bakugo. This whole scene feels very important because these three, from the very beginning, made up the central relationships of the whole story. At number 6, I have another conversation, and that is Deku visiting Spinner. Deku delivers Shigaraki's final words, and at first, Spinner can't even believe he was the one Shigaraki thought about in his last moments. Then Spinner calls Shigaraki his hero and his friend, and the scene keeps switching between Spinner talking about Shigaraki as a person and the public talking about him as a monster and a cautionary tale. This whole scene was done masterfully, and I believe it will feel even more impactful once it gets animated. At number 5, I put All Might getting saved. I'm combining a few things here. First, All Might reflecting on his past, then Bakugo taking Deku's hand, which parallels their childhood and shows that Bakugo refuses to make the same mistake again. And, finally, the actual save and defying Night Eye's premonition. I just know that with the animation and music, this scene will be simply fantastic. My number 4 is the fight between Bakugo and All for One. This fight was important in terms of the themes. It was also cathartic to look at, since it was obvious Bakugo would win, and, finally, it was a visual treat. I imagine the anime should also put quite a bit of care into bringing this gorgeous fight to life. Number 3 is another fight, and it's a battle between Deku and Shigaraki in the psychic space. Even before that stage, the fight between these two looked stunning visually and felt creative in how Deku was using his powers. But everything gets taken to a new level once Deku has to give up One for All and starts breaking into Shigaraki's core. The present physical fight begins merging with both of their memories. The shape of the fight takes on this surreal form. We see Shigaraki creating Deku's shadow and using it to speak. We see Stain's face transforming into Redestro, then transforming again into Overhaul. We see reality bending like the door turning into a photograph. This whole sequence was so trippy and interesting to observe, and it culminated in the emotional climax of the confrontation between Deku and Shigaraki. I feel like that's the scene where Shigaraki's character was broken down fully, a scene where we got to see his very core, and it was all summed up with one of the best and most memorable lines in the whole story. Doesn't matter if you stamp out my hatred. Even if I wind up hollow, the villains need a hero of their own. Next is number 2, and I was seriously considering putting it at number 1. And it's All for One's backstory. I don't even know where to begin with this one. It honestly deserves a separate video. We see the early days of society dealing with quirks, all the darkness and chaos it brought. We see All for One, even as a child, a very creepy child, already murdering people in the street. We find out that he's the one who killed his own brother. We also see glimpses into his fight with all the previous One for All users, as well as how he met Doctor. And we get to find out more about Kuda and the beginning of One for All. There's a quote that I simply have to mention, and it's when Yoichi said about his brother. The ability to both give and take could have been the kindest, most charitable power the world's ever known. MHA always emphasized the connection between a person's quirk and their personality. But I love how this quote encapsulates the idea that, at the end of the day, it's not your powers that make you good or evil. It's your own choices. And finally, this backstory also gives us the thing that fans have been begging for years. And that is a glimpse into the fight between All for One and All Might. Throughout the story, All for One repeatedly mentioned how All Might's expression from that day kept haunting his nightmares. And yes, when we finally get to see those panels, it becomes clear why. I really hope the anime not only doesn't shy away from how dark everything is, but perhaps even extends some parts, like showing more of the fight against All Might. And finally, the moment I put as number 1 is everyone showing up like the Avengers to help Deku fight All for One at the end. While Deku might be the protagonist, this story was never about him alone. It was just as much about everyone else and the influence Deku had on them. This whole sequence of events is pure perfection. Deku putting on All Might themed shirt that one of the refugees gave him, the one that criticized Deku the most, by the way. Aoyama taking Deku's hand and telling him to run. Everyone cheering Deku on and telling him to do his best and that he can do it, because that's what the hero name, Deku, means. Even All For One himself recognized that this was Deku's main strength, inspiring others to stand up against impossible odds too. That's why Deku became the greatest hero, not because of what he did, but because of the impact he had. All Might's punch could change the weather, but Deku's punch not only parted the clouds and changed the weather, it also changed the people. So that's the end of my list, but this video would be incomplete without a few honorable mentions. So here's my top 5 mostly single-panel moments that I'm excited to see animated. Deku calling All For One just a lonely man. Eri saying she wants to sing, and then actually singing for everyone at the end of the story. All Might passing the torch to Bakugo. Deku saying, "I am here" for the first time in the entire story. And lastly, "You are not dead yet" panel. Thank you for listening. Share your own thoughts in the comments, and, hopefully, I'll see you again in a different video.